You've decided that it's important to get an ICF credential, but then you dived in and were surrounded by acronyms and different paths and different requirements, and it's understandable that it can be quite confusing and a little overwhelming. I'm going to do my best today to take you through the process, to demystify, declutter the whole process. It is a little tricky, but we've helped hundreds of natural coaches and guides and leaders around the world to move through the process of acquiring an ICF credential. So I'm Colleen-Joy, founder of Inner Life Skills and MCC coach, and also the author of an ACTP, Accredited Training Program, Level 2 with the ICF. So I'm here to take you through the whole process. Picture a mountain with 3 flags. The top flag at the summit is labeled MCC Master Certified Coach. Somewhere halfway up is PCC flag, which is Professional Certified Coach, and at base camp is ACC flag, which is Associate Certified Coach. On your journey to mastery, to acquire an ICF credential, you can skip flag number 1, but you cannot skip flag number 2. So the PCC flag, the PCC credential, is the sweet spot, and most coaches aim for that and are actually satisfied with acquiring PCC. MCC is much harder to acquire. It truly is the summit. Depending on the amount of coaching experience you have, the amount of training, certified training that you have, your budget, and whether there is a real pressure or demand for you to have an ICF credential in your life, you might decide to wait until you're ready for PCC instead of going through the motions of first ACC, then PCC. As you can imagine, ACC Associate, PCC Professional, and MCC Master each have incrementally more demands. You're required to prove a higher level of coaching competency at each of these milestones. If you're in the life coaching space, if you're in a wellness coaching space, there may not be as much of a demand on you to have an ICF credential. But certainly in the business coaching space, executive coaching space, leadership coaching space, there seems to be a much more higher demand on coaches to have credentials. So when employers, when corporations and organizations are looking to hire, for example, executive coaches, and to sign them up for 1 and 2 year contracts, they might actually put as a baseline and a requirement for an ICF credential. Now, if you're pitching for that kind of work, you're going to be pitching against ACC, PCC, and MCC coaches, and naturally, your experience, your personality, and all those good things will count. But if you have ACC and you're pitching against PCC and MCC coaches, you're unlikely to get the work as easily as if you were standing higher up that credential mountain. What the ICF credential is telling a prospective client is that you've jumped through all the hoops to prove you are competent, to prove that you have ethical standards, and that you are coaching at international levels. Whether you're aiming to achieve ACC Associate Certified Coach, PCC Professional Certified Coach, or MCC Master Certified Coach, there are 3 paths up the mountain, and these 3 paths will get you to each of those flags, each of those milestones. They are the portfolio path, the approved coach-specific training hour path, yes, say that 3 times fast, and the ACTP, which is the top, most efficient path and the least expensive path via the ICF, which is the ACTP, Accredited Coach Training Path. One of the biggest regrets that I hear coaches lament over is when they've decided at some point to get an ICF credential, and now they face the choice of the 3 paths that the ICF offer up the credential mountain from ACC to PCC to MCC. And those 3 paths are the portfolio path, the approved coach training hour path, and the accredited coach training program path. The ACTP path is the quickest, the cheapest, and the easiest path with the ICF, because you have completed a training that has taken care of everything that you need, from mentor hours to observed coaching sessions to performance evaluations. Whereas the portfolio path and the approved coach-specific training path, you're going to have to do a lot of that with the ICF. It's going to take longer and it's going to cost a lot more money, and they're extremely strict because they know you haven't done a complete training program. I've heard so many coaches regret that they went the portfolio or the approved coach-specific training hour path to get their credentials with the ICF instead of the more direct, cheaper, less admin, and less hoops to jump through ACTP, Accredited Coach Training Path. So if you're at the beginning of this journey, please do carefully consider which of those 3 paths you're going to intentionally take. And in the long run, I suggest that an ACTP program is going to pay off at the end, because you're not going to have to redo performance evaluations or to accumulate testimonials, jump through more hoops, pay more money, and really have an admin nightmare to apply for your coaching credential with the ICF. The ICF offers 3 paths to credential at the ACC, PCC, and MCC level. Picture those paths as different journeys up the mountain to the MCC summit. The portfolio path is going around the mountain, down the valley, through the swamp. It's harder. It's more expensive. It takes longer. There's a lot more admin involved because you have to prove to the ICF that you can coach. Whereas if you go the ACTP path, that's like a direct line up the path, up the mountain. An ACTP program includes assessments, observed coaching sessions, mentor hours, all the additional requirements that the ICF asks for. Therefore, it's quicker and it is more affordable with less admin. To find out more about the ICF credential path, of course, visit the ICF's website, coachingfederation.org. You'll find that under the tab Credentials and Paths, this is in 2023, there are the 3 milestones, ACC, PCC, and MCC. And when you click on any of them, you're going to immediately be faced with what you are required to have to at least consider applying for that credential. So that base camp first flag on the mountain of your ICF credential path, you need 60 hours of coaching education, and you need 100+ hours of coaching experience. Now, there are a few more details in terms of how much of that coaching experience needs to be paid for example, and how much can be pro bono. But at first glance, this should give you enough of an understanding to decide whether you might qualify for ACC. So if you've got a lot more than 100 hours of experience and a lot more than 60 hours of coaching education, you might then decide to immediately consider jumping straight into the PCC credential application path. You are also required to have 10 hours of mental coaching. You also need to complete a performance evaluation, which can be done with the ICF or via your training provider if it is an ACTP program. Plus, you will need to do a online theory scenario-based ICF credentialing exam. Once you've decided whether you can qualify for ACC, you would go down to this area where there are additional tabs to get a little bit more details around what specifically they mean by education, by experience, by the mental coaching, the performance evaluation, and their knowledge assessment exam. Now, you'll see also that they will supply the latest prices and the all-important 3 pathways up the mountain, which are applicable for all of the ICF credentials. There is an ACSTH path, which is approved coach-specific training hours. There is also the portfolio path, which is the longest, most expensive, most complicated way to apply to the ICF. And then there is the most direct path, which is the level 1 or level 2 ACTP path. Now, why you might want to really consider an ACTP path instead of the other 2 paths, besides that the savings is considerable and that the estimated time for their review is much shorter and the admin that they ask you to supply is much less, is because your ACTP program via a training provider would have taken care of your performance evaluation plus your mental coaching, which means that you don't have to do that with the ICF directly. And that's a much more natural, comfortable fit usually. In terms of the experience that you need, out of your 100 hours of coaching experience, at least 75 of those hours must be paid for. And as you can see, they also explain that the experience hours must have been with at least 8 different clients, and 25 of the hours must have occurred within 18 months prior to submitting the credential application. So there's a timing issue here. And of the 100 or more coaching experience hours, as I said, 75 hours need to be paid for. You can also see that for this specific purpose, the ICF defines the start of a coach-specific education as any course that has at least 30 hours, of which 24 hours need to be core competency instruction. And what that means is that it can't be a course that does not teach the ICF core competencies. The easiest way to make sure that that's all in place is to choose an ACTP program. Some ACTP programs like Inner Life Skills Master Coach will allow you to do a module at a time to make sure that it fits with your budget and your schedule, whereas other ACTP providers will insist that you sign up for the full training program. Looking at the requirements for PCC credentialing, remember that a lot of coaches skip applying for ACC. It is possible to apply directly to PCC as long as you have the 125 plus hours of coaching education and over 500 hours of coaching experience. You also need your 10 hours of mental coaching. You also need to have completed and passed a performance evaluation, and you need to do the ICF Credential online theory scenario-based exam. The ICF used to ask for these hours to be logged, but because of confidentiality laws, they no longer require you to provide a list of your clients' names or contact details. It is more of an honor system, but please do make sure that the hours that you declare are real, because they can, of course, audit those hours and check that they're real. And also, it is just an honorable thing to do. If you scroll down, once again, you will see a little bit more detail about specifically what is required. And the thing to take note of is, once again, there are 3 paths up the mountain. The portfolio path, which is the long road round and up towards the PCC flag. It's much more expensive, takes a lot longer to complete, and you have to supply a lot more information to the ICF. We've had a lot of coaches tell us how they regret having taken the portfolio path. It's not to say that it isn't possible, but it's a lot more difficult. The approved coach-specific training hour path is a slightly easier path, but you still need to do a performance evaluation with the ICF. And as you can see, it's still much more pricey and takes longer. If, however, you have completed a full accredited coach training program at a level 2 benchmark, the ICF knows that you have completed, for example, the 10 hours of mental coaching, that you've also passed a performance evaluation through your training provider. You only therefore need to do their online ICF credentialing exam, which is a theory, open book, scenario-based multiple choice exam. So you'll see that that ends up being a much more direct path. If you look at the experience that is required, you'll see that, once again, most of your training needs to be ICF competency orientated. Plus, you will see that of your 500 hours of coaching experience, 450 need to be paid for. You need to have at least 25 clients. And once again, 50 of the hours need to have occurred within the 18 months prior to submitting your credential application. A PCC credential is highly regarded in the world, and a lot of corporate clients and organizational clients especially will not consider hiring an external coach without, at the very least, a PCC credential. Now let's look at the top of the mountain, the MCC credentialing path. You cannot apply for MCC without a PCC. So this is something for most coaches to strive for, and it's something to keep in mind. And if you're being super efficient, you might, for example, want to sign up for a program that already includes your over 200 hours of coaching education experience, so that you've got that ticked off, and that one day when you've accumulated your 2,500 hours of coaching experience, you don't have to go and find additional training because you've already got that in place. So as you can see, the ICF requires that you already have a PCC or have held a PCC credential. You'll once again see the other requirements are the 10 hours of mental coaching, the successful completion of a performance evaluation, and the passing of the ICF credentialing exam. Yes, there is a portfolio path to MCC, but as you can tell, once again, it is a lot more admin heavy. You will need to prove to the ICF that you can coach according to MCC markers and display evidence of their core competencies and their ethics at a master level. So therefore, truly to acquire MCC, usually the ACTP path is the one that is the most sought after. This is considered to be a level 3 program, and in essence, it can be an ACTP program that accumulates the 200 plus hours that are required. And as you can see, the ICF will regard that you have built into the program the education hours and mentoring required. So an ACTP program that has twice the amount of mentor coaching, because you will need 10 hours for PCC and an additional 10 hours for MCC. Now, some programs won't have the full 20 hours of mentor coaching, but it is quite easy to find an MCC coach and pay them for those 10 hours of mentoring. Those 10 hours, 3 of those hours need to be individual mentor hours, and 7 of those hours can be class-based with a small group. Regardless of whether you have completed a performance evaluation at the PCC level, because MCC is the top of the credential mountain, the most highly sought after credential, you still will need to submit 2 recorded coaching sessions with transcripts of between 20 and 60 minutes. So as you can see, there is an additional requirement, even if you've completed an ACTP program, even if you have more than 200 hours of coaching education and you've logged your 2,500 hours of experience and you already have PCC, because this is an exceptional credential, you will still need to then record 2 sessions and submit them to the ICF. I know it can be daunting. It is a walk up the mountain. And for many of us, myself included as an MCC credentialed coach, it has been highly, highly rewarding. Not only does this walk up the credential mountain give us the confidence that we know we're coaching at internationally benchmarked standards, but for clients that are becoming far more discerning, the more the coaching industry blossoms and grows, the more competition every coach has, and therefore clients are starting to sift through the sand to find the gold, to look for those coaches that have actually demonstrated and proven that they can coach at professional levels. I highly recommend that if you're at the beginning of this journey, or if you're somewhere on that mountain, do consider completing a full ACTP program so that in the long run, you've got everything you need when you approach the ICF for your credential application. All you will need to do then is submit your certificate, because they know that the ACTP program contains the mentor hours, the core competencies, the resource development, the code of ethics, the observed coaching sessions, and the all-important performance evaluation for PCC and ACC levels. All you will then have to do is submit your certificate and do their online, what used to be called a knowledge assessment, which is a theory-based, multiple choice test. Usually takes approximately 2 hours for most coaches to complete, where if you are familiar with the code of ethics and the core competencies, you'll be given scenarios that you have to select an appropriate response for, or identify the problem, for example, the least favorable or the most favorable coaching response. To date, our graduates, Inner Life Skills Master Coaches, have always passed their credential application as well as their assessments, because we provide an extremely well-rounded, comprehensive ACTP program that fully equips our coaches to acquire their credentials if that is something that they're striving for. If my team and I at Inner Life Skills can assist you in any way with your journey up the ICF Credential Mountain to achieve your ACC, PCC, and MCC, do chat to us.